Welcome, gentlemen, to project 3 of this work on web design. Now, as you can probably see from the screen in front of you, what we're going to be doing in this particular project is to create a web page including some text and inserting for the first time an image. Now, the way in which the page is going to look is on your OneNote that you can access. I'll just move that across here if I can. Just a moment. See if it's going to let me do that. That's a little awkward with the screen I'm using. Just bear with me. Okay, so what we can see pretty much hopefully now is the end product of what we want to produce. So we've got some text here with a heading, the various headings, an image that we're going to put in this place here and have the text float around it. Okay, so this is basically described in the OneNote that you've got access to. Okay, so please make sure you open that. Okay, so the objectives, what we're going to be doing is to make ourselves a folder, set up a new web page, and we're going to save it once again as index.html. We'll put some real text in as well as some dummy text, and we'll use a text file to help us with some of the, say for some typing, so we'll insert the text directly from a text file. We'll also use some dummy text, and we'll have a look at how we can source that from an internet site. And we'll do some styling, okay, with CSS again, and use some further aspects of the box model. Also, we'll have a look at what is meant by block elements and how they behave on a web page. Add an image to our web page, and then use this property called float, which is a CSS property, to help the text float around the image. Okay, so there'll be a link on your OneNote soon, once I've finished actually creating it, and you can access this video here. Also, please note these two things that you need to do here. I want you to create a folder called images inside your project 3 folder. This image here, which is going to be the one of the blocks, okay, you need to make sure that you make an images folder at the same level as your index file, and I'll do that and I'll show you what I mean by that if you're not too clear. And we're going to put that image into that folder. Also, we're going to make another folder called text files, and we're going to take this main text file and we're going to insert or copy that into that text files folder. Okay, so let's begin that, I suppose, straight away. So let's see if I'm in the right place here. Yes, I am. Okay, so as you can see, I've already started to do some of this here. So in your web design 2015 folder, create a project 3 folder, then using new folder, create an images folder and a text files folder. Okay, so inside the images folder, I'm going to go back to my OneNote now. I'm going to click on that, and let's see if I can copy it. Control C, and let's see if I can paste that in. Yes, that worked fine. So using Control C, Control V to paste, and let's go back up a level. I've made my text files folder, already got that in there. So if I haven't, let's go back to OneNote, highlight that, Control C for copy, head back to our text files folder, and I can either go Control V or right click and paste. So Control V should also work. There it is. Okay, so having done that, let's now start to create our web page. Okay, so here we are in Notepad. So what I'm going to do is open, going to go back to that template HTML that we made last time. Okay, so let's open that one up. Okay, so it saved us a little bit of typing here. Let's go File, Save As, go into Project 3, and here is where we're going to save this as index.html. Just want to make sure the language is set to hypertext markup. Okay, so that's all good. Let's have a look now. What we're going to do is put our title in here. Okay, you need to be also doing this, please. Don't just watch the video. You need to be doing this at the same time. Pause the video if you need to, and then do the various things that you see here. If need be, rewind the video until you basically we have our you're creating it as we go. Alright, so we've got the HTML, we've got basic structure here. What I'm going to do now is gets this text into here. Okay, so the text we're going to use, let's go File, Open. Okay, I'm going to go to that text file, open that up. Okay, and here's the text we want. So I'm just going to copy that, Control C, head back to index here, and paste that in. Forgive me if this is not quite wide enough, but we'll just have to work around it. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is actually read this text as we sort of work with it. Okay, so have a bit of, just pause the video, have a bit of read of what this is, because it basically describes what this task is about. Okay, the block elements, I think we're going to make that an H2 heading. And the rest of these are paragraphs. And you might notice I've already got a couple of tags left in this text file already. The strong elements here, tags, sorry. What they do is to basically make what's between them bold, so it stands out. Okay, just about there. There we go. Alright, so we've got that in there, and what we want to do next is, okay, I think we're going to put some dummy text in now. Dummy text is used when you're creating a web page, and what you're basically trying to do is to get the look of the page okay without worrying too much about the content. Content would need to then be put back in place of the dummy text normally, and certainly in your assessment later on you cannot have dummy text in there. It has to be real text. But for the purposes of just getting a bit more text in here, let's go to a website where you can grab some dummy text. Okay, so as you might see, I've opened up Google here. I've typed dummy text as the search. Okay, and the first hit here, dummy text generator. Okay, so this is a reasonably useful little website. So it's called basically where it's going to allow us to create different kinds of dummy text. As you might see here, there are different options you can use, and it absolutely doesn't matter which one you want to use, although I probably would not go for that last option there, it just looks too horrible. The lorem ipsum one is the sort of standard one. I'm going to go with that. Okay, so I'm going to work with 3 paragraphs. Okay, doesn't really matter how long they are, and yes, I do want to display the P tag, saves me having to put them in. Okay, so I'm going to just highlight that. There is this option to select copy to clipboard, but you can just highlight yourself and then Control C, head back to our Notepad++, and let's put that in. Okay, so now we've got some dummy text here. The spacing here doesn't matter. You might want to, just for your own visual purposes, have spaces there, but they actually do not put blank lines onto your web page. They're only seen here in this code view. Okay, now what we do want to have is a couple of little headings here and here, and we'll make those H3 headings. So I'm just going to take a little bit of text from one of these paragraphs, copy, paste that in, and I'm going to put some H3 tags around those. Remember, you should have a hierarchy of headings, meaning that H1 should be bigger than H2 and H2 bigger than H3 and so on down. Let's copy something that just looks a little different, and let's put our H3 tags around those again. Okay, having done that, okay, let's save that. Let's run that in Chrome. Okay, a bit hard to see, so let me just make that a little smaller. Still hard to see because we haven't limited the width of the page, so you can open that up in your own browser there. Let me just see if I can adjust that. Yeah, there we go. So that's basically how our thing's looking at the moment. We are missing the main heading up here, which is Project 3. So let me just close this and go and put that in. That's perhaps something I should have done straight off. So that's the closing tag, and let's make sure we put in the opening H1 tag. Okay, don't forget to save as you go. Alright, so having done that, let's do a little bit of styling of this page here. Okay, now for a start, remember what we're going to do is we're going to add some styling to the head of the document. Later on we'll look at where we can link a styling sheet. Okay, now this first rule may look a little odd, this weird looking selector here. Now what this is used for in web pages is to select all elements of your page. So every single thing that's on our web page at the moment, I'm setting the padding and the margin to 0. Now the reason why I want to do that is that I want to remove the browser defaults. Okay, and one thing I've forgotten to do, we need to put in our styling tags. And this is something we should really have added perhaps to our template. Okay, so having removed that default padding and margin, let's run it in our browser again. And hopefully we'll actually see something in a moment. No, nothing. Not sure why. What have I done wrong there? Didn't close the styling tag properly. Okay, let's try that again. Still nothing. Why not? Make sure I save the page. Didn't have a semicolon there. That may be affecting it. No, I just don't know why that's not working at the moment. pause the video and I'll come back to you. Okay, quite a few typos. There was another one. Let's see if that makes any difference. Yes, it did. So got to watch those typos, don't we? Okay, so here's our web page. Notice how it's all cramped up now. This is because I've removed the padding and the margin, okay, which is that thing that goes around each of the elements on your page that you should have learnt about in Project 2. And I think we'll do a little bit of follow up of that in class, or would have covered that in class perhaps for this particular video here. Okay, so let's also now set up some defaults for the body. Don't need a colon there, do I? Okay, just setting up a few defaults for the body. Now you might recall that your whole page is included in these body tags from here to here. So what we're doing now is we're setting some defaults for essentially our page, okay, so the canvas on which the rest of the page is going to go. So some padding of 20 should put some room top, bottom, left and right, okay, and then the margin of 0 and auto, what that is doing is making the top margin 0 and the bottom, but the left and the right is set to auto, so that should center our page. And then the width has been set to 600, font size 100%. Basically why you set that is that if you then set font sizes with percentages, then they're going to be relative to this 100%, and we'll explain that a bit more as we put different font sizes as we go. And this is something that I think we'll need to do a session perhaps in class about, or some background reading on one of these videos. Okay, so having done that, let's go and have a look at our page again. Okay, so as you can see here, okay, our page is now 600 pixels wide. We've got this padding of 20 pixels at the top here, and it also is on the left and the right and the bottom, but we can't really see that at the moment. Okay, so let's close that and let's now continue to style. So for the headings H1, H2, and I don't really see why we shouldn't do that for H3 as well. What we're going to do is to set a slightly different font. Now we'll have a look at trying to break away from these default sort of fonts which are built into your operating system, using some web fonts or ones that we can download, but for now we'll just stick with these sort of ones which are on most Windows or Mac computers. Okay, and let's have a look at trying to just alter one of the fonts, heading sizes. Okay, so by setting that to 180%, it's going to be 80% bigger than the 100%. So this is where using percentages can be quite helpful for using to set font sizes and things like that, because it's all basically relative to whatever you set on the body here. Now I will also set the heading 1 size, and let's set the H3 to something just a little different. Once again, font size though, and we'll set that to 150%, and I want to put a little bit of margin at the top, and I'm going to use some pixels here for that, which is a different way of setting the sizes of various things. Okay, so one of the things that we need to look at, perhaps as a reminder for those who did this last year, was the different kinds of units that you can use to set sizes. Let me just put a note here on your page just for now, and we'll get rid of this in a moment, but let's just talk briefly about this for now. Now, there are, as I mentioned before, some different ways you can set sizes. Now, percentages is one of those. There are also a thing called M's, and recently introduced is a thing called Rems. And these are examples of what's called relative sizing. The way that that works is you have your sort of baseline, and here that was at 100%, and then when you set sizes and percentages, okay, basically relative to that 100%, so this one will be 1.5 times bigger, this will be 1.8 times bigger, and that'll be over 2 times bigger than the default font size here. What these other ones are about, I think we'll leave for another day. The way that you can use absolute sizing is to use pixels, or px for short. So this is an example of it here, and so 15 pixels is an absolute size, and yeah, this is a way in which you can specify a given size that won't basically change. Alright, let's leave that for now and carry on with a little bit more styling here. Okay, so let's have a look at how our page is looking right now. Okay, so there's our page. Here's our project 3. That's that 210% size. Okay, this is 180%, and this is our 150%, and everything else is at the moment that 100%, which is going to be 16 pixels if you looked at it in pixels. Okay, let's move on and let's set some styling for the paragraph or paragraphs. Okay, font size for this, I think 16 pixels is too large for a normal page. If you look at that in a normal window in a normal browser, that would be a bit big. So I'm going to set that to 90%. I'm going to set some margin on the bottom. Now the reason for that is we normally want a bit of space, vertical space, between our paragraphs. Now I can set that in pixels, and I will do so just for now, but we'll come back and we'll have a go at trying to put that in percentages. Now word spacing 200%, what that means is it's twice the normal word spacing. Okay, so let's launch that. Now if I zoom up on that a bit, Okay, now the normal word spacing, the spacing between the words, what I've effectively done is double that, so it's just spaced out a bit more, looks a bit better. Okay, and notice that now we have a bit of spacing between the paragraphs. So below each paragraph we've got a margin bottom of 10 pixels at the moment. Okay, and let's go and see if we can perhaps set that in percentages to match the rest of the page. So let's have a look at something like 2%. Okay, and that's not too bad, perhaps just a little too much. So let's try 1%. Yeah, it's probably a bit better. Okay, so I'm going to leave that in percentages to sort of match the rest of what we're doing here with percentages at the moment. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like the normal paragraphs and the H3 headings, both of those to be sort of moved in a little bit. So I'm going to put some margin on the left of these. Let's choose margin left, and I'm going to set that as 3%. Okay, should have had a semicolon there too. Okay, let's have a look and see how that looks. So as you can see, by putting that 3% on the left of the paragraphs and on H3, it effectively makes these other headings sort of stand out a bit more, basically protruding. It looks like they're protruding to the left there, whereas in fact we've actually moved everything else slightly to the right by putting some margin on the left of both the paragraphs and the H3 headings. Okay, and what else do we want to style? Let's have a look. What else can we show you guys? Okay, so let's have a look at this kind of selector here. This is called a descendant selector. It's a new sort of piece of terminology. Let's just write that for a moment. Okay, so let's make that. So this is called a descendant selector. So what that means is that this thing here, and that was terribly done, rub that out. So it was H1 plus P. So what the plus does together with the P is to say, right, if you have a paragraph directly following H1, so the first paragraph following an H1 heading, then this styling will apply to that. Remember, it will apply to all paragraphs directly following an H1, but only the first one that follows. So what I mean is that if you've got many situations where you've got H1 tags, and then you've got a paragraph, and then later on in your page you had that repeated, then this styling that we're going to write would apply to each of those situations. So let's say we've got many paragraphs here, but then later on in our page we had another H1 heading, and then some paragraphs following that. Okay, the styling we're going to write would apply to this paragraph and to this one here, okay, and any others that fit that kind of situation. Okay, so let's clear that and get back to doing that styling then. Oh, I've left that as a pencil and I want it back as the normal pointer. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, let's change the color of the text. I'm going to use a sort of light grey color. And I'm going to make the font weight a bit heavier. Excuse me. Okay, and I'm going to make that just bold for now, which will would normally appear quite dark black, but because we've changed the color, okay, it's going to appear sort of as a light, sort of, well, a grayish color. So save the page. Let's have a look at that. Okay, so as you can see, it is bold, but it is not standing out too ridiculously too much, because we've made the text color basically a darker grey, but not too dark. Okay, so yep, that's called a descendant selector. Now, what we also want to do now is we've got to insert this image. So how do we do that? Well, we need to decide where we want to put the image. Well, I want to put the image directly after this heading called block elements. And to insert an image, we use IMG. And we put src for the source. And then we've got to put the path in. Now this is something which is, I suppose, tedious to do when you're using Notepad++. A lot easier to use something like Dreamweaver for this, where it'll put it in for us, but we don't have Dreamweaver here. So this has to be the exact name of the file that you're wanting to use, and the path also has to be correct. So what I'm saying here is that we're going to go to the images folder and find the file called child alphabet block stacked and SML, meaning small. Okay, and those hyphens are also really important, so you really need to check that that's correct. Now the width and the height, normally you shouldn't need to specify, because that should come straight from the image itself. One thing you should specify is a little bit of text to describe what this image is about. People who are using a screen reader, okay, so in other words, people who are sight impaired or blind, still use websites, still use the internet, and use a screen reader to do that. And so what the screen reader will do is to alert them that there's an image, and this little bit of text here will describe the image for them. Okay, so this really needs to be tested, so let's have a look and see if that's actually going to pick up the image properly. Yeah, it does. Okay, great. So I didn't make any spelling mistakes this time. Right, so now we have our almost finished web page. Now, I mentioned before that we were going to talk about block elements. So what's all that about? Let me just try and get the pen back here, which is playing a little difficult. Okay, so when you stack blocks like you can see in the picture there, when you stack them, they go one on top of the other. Now sure, you can stack them in different ways, but one of the simplest ways of stacking blocks is like this. Okay, so what I'd like you to notice is that your web page seems to be stacking in the same way. So here we have an H1, then we've got a paragraph and another paragraph. Now this paragraph didn't go next to this one, it went underneath. And why was that? Well, because these HTML elements their default way of working is to stack, and they're called block elements because they stack like blocks. Now, one of the things that I did put in here deliberately before was this here. Remember, we had these strong tags around those. Well, strong tags can't be block elements because otherwise we'd have block and then elements directly underneath it and so on. So there are block elements, and then there are other things called inline elements. And they're called inline because they go in the line. So they don't stack, they're simply used to put some structure around things that are going to be in some lines, in a line of text normally. Okay, so we have our block elements stacking one on top of the other down the page and so on. Okay, then we can also have sometimes these inline elements that look basically like you've done something inside the line. Okay, let's clear all that. Now what we want to do is I want to try and get this text to basically flow around this so that the text goes in this position here. And we also want to put a little bit of room to the right of the image so the text doesn't go right up next to it. Okay, so how do we achieve that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually do something to the image. We're going to apply a property called float. Now what float does is it takes whatever element you apply it to. In this case we're going to work with an image, but it can apply to other things, not only to images. In this case we're going to take our image, apply something called float left to it, and what that will do is it takes it out of this normal stacked flow, and it'll put whatever you float left, in this case the image, to the top left, as far top left as it can go, and then the other things which are still block elements will effectively stack up next to it, so will appear in this sort of position here. Okay, well here actually, but I'll basically right down there, so we'll have our text sitting in here. Okay, so float left, apply it to an image, the image goes to the top left, as far top left as it can go. Now why doesn't it go all the way to the top of the page? Because these things here, all these things are in the way already. Okay, so it's going to the top left, as far top left as it can go. Okay, and then the other block elements following will simply stack up next to it. Right, so let's see how that looks in practice. Okay, so coming back to our Notepad++ here. Okay, let's now apply that styling. Well, I want to apply it to the image. Now this will apply to all images at the moment, and sometimes we want different styling for different images, so we're going to have to look and see later on how we might achieve that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of margin on the right of our images at the moment, because I want that room basically to the right of the image so the text won't jam up right next to it. And here is this float property. Let's get the spelling right, and we're going to float the image to the left, and let's put a little bit of room at the bottom of the image as well. Now I am specifying this in pixels. You could also try and put it in percentages as well. Okay, so let's have a look and see how that looks. Let me just check my styling here. Yeah, I think that looks alright, so let's run that. Okay, so there's our effectively finished page here. So we've got our block element still going one on top of the other, but this floated element is coming out of that normal flow of one thing on top of the other, and it's going to the top left of where it would normally go, and the other things are just stacking up next to it at this time. Just to show you that you could also float things to the right. Now if I'm going to float that to the right, okay, really I want the margin to be on the left, otherwise if we didn't do that we'd get this kind of situation. Not too bad actually. This text here, okay, this actually doesn't look too bad at the moment, but sometimes depending on the picture the text might be too close there, so we would change that margin right to margin left, and let's have a look at it now. Okay, so that's how it's looking at the moment. Not really that much different from what we just had. Okay, so there we have it, folks. Let's put this back to our margin right, and let's float our image to the left. Okay, and what you need to do with this is once you've created it, some of you guys were copying and pasting, by the looks of it, this whole code here. Now that's not what I'm wanting, so let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to save this, so file save, it's basically already saved. So I've saved it in here as index. So let me just cancel that. Now once you've saved it, so let's just close those two. I'm going to go to where I've got my project 3 file, there we go, index. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back to my Notepad++. Now you need to go to your particular folder here, or your folder Notepad++ one, and I'm now going to paste that in to attach the file. Yeah, so there's my index, here's my finished product, and really it would be a good idea if I identified that as project 3. And maybe I'll just delete that file, put project 3, press enter, and then paste again. Okay, so the project 3 and the file go together. Now you need to obviously do that for your one. I'm not going to leave this in here in the one that you can access. Okay, so just to hopefully make that totally clear, let's go to Aaron's one here. Okay, so he hasn't put any homework in here, so what he would do is he would put his index for project 3 into here and put project 3 with it. Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit clearer. Let me actually get rid of that for Aaron, otherwise he'll have a bit of extra work the rest of you guys won't have had done for them. And let me delete this as well. Okay folks, have a go at doing this, and yeah, putting the file in your area where you've got your web design work inside your OneNote, as well as creating it in Notepad++. Okay guys, we'll catch you tomorrow.